Welcome, fellow Rotarians and guests. Let us begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to now invite up Eric Erickson to facilitate today's invocation.
Thank you, President Jason. Welcome, fellow Rotarians. Please bow your heads. Thank you, Lord, for the chance to meet in person today. Thank you for this meal and for those who prepared it. While we enjoy the gradual freedom from the restrictions of a pandemic, we lift up the people of India today who are in a real crisis. Thank you for those who have committed themselves, helping to stop the progress of COVID in India. It's an uphill battle, and we ask for the best care for those who are suffering. Lord, thank you for the spirit of cooperation when rivals can see mutual benefit of their missions, and to humbly ask for help when it's needed, and to offer advice and care for each other without concern for personal achievement. And Lord, thank you for teachers and professors and coaches and mentors of all kinds, offering a true gift that cannot be measured and can only be repaid by using it, using what is gained and giving it to someone else. In your name, amen.
Eric, thank you very much. Last week we had a planning session for Downtown Rotary, and Eric, as a member of the board, was certainly part of that conversation. We thought, there is probably some confusion. We now do have two Eric Ericksons as members of this club. So from now on, we decided Eric Erickson the first is the one sitting down below and who did today's invocation. So would like to now take a moment and recognize our guests today. If you are a guest of the Downtown Rotary Club, please stand and be recognized, please. Very good. Thank you. Thank you for joining us today. All right. More exciting new inductions. We have 3 today. I'd like to begin with Jack Marsh, who will introduce Jerry Johnson.
Good afternoon, everyone. Is this one on? Okay, good. It was my honor to nominate my friend for membership into Sioux Falls Downtown Rotary, and today it is my privilege to welcome the newest member of Downtown Rotary, Jerry Johnson. Jerry is a distinguished economist, professor, and retired dean of the USD School of Business. Raised on a farm in Milford, Iowa, near Lake Okoboji, Jerry came to South Dakota in 1964, where he earned an MBA from the University of South Dakota. He went on to earn his PhD in economics from Iowa State University in 1971. Jerry served on the USD faculty for 35 years and taught economics to countless students and future business leaders, including several members of this club. He was director of the Business Research Bureau for 9 years and dean of the B School for 13 years until his retirement in 2003. Jerry took temporary leave from USD 2 or 3 times to work in Washington at the Congressional Budget Office and the Joint Economics Committee, and he also was a visiting professor at Iowa State. Jerry and his wife, the former Betty Barnhill, have been married for 58 years. They have 3 adult children, 7 grandchildren, and 1 great-grandchild. Son Jeffrey Johnson is a bond trader in Scottsdale, Arizona. Daughter Amy Lindeman is a family practice physician here in Sioux Falls at Avera's McGreevy Clinic. And daughter Christy Dornbush of Howard, South Dakota, works for the Good Samaritan Society in accounts receivable. Jerry has been an active member of Vermilion Rotary for the past 15 years. Jerry and Betty decided to move from Vermilion to Sioux Falls last November, and he has been a frequent guest of mine here at meetings over the last several weeks. Please welcome the newest member of Sioux Falls Downtown Rotary, Dr. Jerry Johnson.
Thank you, Jack. I warned him that it's always dangerous to put a retired professor in front of a podium. We're programmed for 50 minutes. Get your pencils out, guys. No, it's a really a privilege of my being here today, and I just want to share how I happen to be here and join your club. About the last meeting or so in Vermillion, there was a guy by the name of Ted Munster who grabbed me by my collar, and he put me over the center and the side of the room. He says, "You're going to join the downtown Rotary Club in Sioux Falls." Not only that, he says, "I've already contacted this guy by the name of Jack Marsh. Is there any question that I could say?" There's no way I could say no, so I'm pleased to be here. Certainly a pleasure. As in the past, I look forward to being a part of your organization. Every time I go to Rotary, frankly, I look over here, the four-way test of Rotary. And in my view, that says it all. That says it all, and for that reason, I look forward to working with all of you, renewing some acquaintances. For those of you that I didn't give particularly good grades in classroom, don't worry, I've thrown my grade books away. No problem. Thank you, and I look forward to being with you.
Thank you, Jerry. And while I never had you as a professor, I was a student in the business school, and we were discussing the blue books, those books that you would have to write these long essays out where your hand hurt terribly after those essays. So, Jerry, it is a pleasure to have you. I'd like to now invite up Rotarian Pam Homan to introduce two new Rotarians.
Good afternoon. I have nominated two new Rotarians to join our group, and I will speak about both of them, and then they'll step forward to have a few words with you. Susie O'Meara Hernez recently joined Augustana University, and she leads our community engagement and strategic partnership work for us at Augustana. Susie has an extensive executive and strategic leadership career in both nonprofit, for-profit, and healthcare sectors. Susie attended Augustana, earning undergraduate degrees in both business administration and management information systems. She has a master's degree in management, emphasizing with organizational leadership, and an MBA with emphasis in project management. Susie is a native of Sioux Falls. She and her husband, Eric, have two boys who both attend Edison Middle School. So we'll soon welcome Susie as one of our newest members. John Maminga serves as our Associate Vice President for Development at Augustana University. He leads the development and fundraising efforts for us. John brings significant experience and expertise in all aspects of philanthropy, from major gifts, annual gifts, and planned giving. John is a proud small-town South Dakota boy growing up in Marion, South Dakota. He attended the University of South Dakota, earning his BA in political science and an MA in public administration. Over the last decade, John has worked for various nonprofit organizations, including the USD's Foundation, Boys and Girls Club of Capital Area, and the South Dakota Nonprofit Association. John and his wife, Jenny, have a set of very energetic twins who are 4 years old. Welcome, John.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be joining you all as a fellow Rotarian. Thank you for having me. And as Pam said, that I grew up in Sioux Falls, then I went to Augustana, and after that I left. I started my career away from Sioux Falls, really enjoyed a tremendous time away, but then I was recruited back in the early 2000s to come home. And it was the perfect opportunity, and from there I knew I would never leave. Most of my work was national in nature, even though I moved back, so it often had me traveling away from Sioux Falls, but here was always home. I got recruited many times to move with those organizations because I was traveling to these large cities. I said, day-to-day life here is just too amazing. And now I have the opportunity that my work brings me into Sioux Falls with our community engagement, working with Augustana, and the time was right to get involved with Rotary. I've always been so impressed and so amazed with the impact that you all make, and now I'm honored to be joining you and engaging with all of you. So thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am John Maminga. Like Pam said, I am a small-town South Dakota kid from Marion, South Dakota, town of 800, graduated high school with 14. And I've lived in Sioux Falls for a little over a decade now. My wife and I moved from Pierre, South Dakota, where she was an assistant attorney general. She now is a federal prosecutor in the U.S. Attorney's Office. Our 4-year-old twins are very energetic. Their grandfather is here right now, John Pullman, right there. So I'm really excited to be a part of Downtown Rotary. Actually, the journey to Downtown Rotary began about 10 years ago with Ted Munster, who started talking to me a little bit about getting involved with Rotary and how Downtown Rotary was such a great club. You know, and it's always in the back of my mind, and I really appreciate Pam for nominating me to join your club. My wife and I love Sioux Falls. We're excited to be a part of the community in a deeper way. And my good friend Jane Gullickson, who is also a graduate of Marion High School, mentioned that one of the things that she really gets out of the club is the fellowship. If you're having a bad day, you come to the club, it can really turn your day around. So I'm really looking forward to getting to know all of you and being an active member of Rotary. Thanks.
Jerry, Susie, and John, welcome to the Downtown Rotary Club, and we look forward to getting you to know all of you better in the future. Well, this is certainly a day for academia. So now we will move into the program. Justin Sell, who was honored as the 2014 to 2015 Under Armour National Athletics Director of the Year, has moved Jackrabbit Athletics forward in a number of areas in its Division I pursuits since being introduced as the 12th Director of Athletics at South Dakota State on May 7, 2009. Sell oversees the Jackrabbits' 19 Sports Division I athletics program. 16 SDSU teams compete in the Summit League, while football is a member of the Missouri Valley Football Conference within the Football Championship Subdivision, and wrestling competes as a member of the Big 12 Conference. Under his leadership, South Dakota State continues to make strides in athletic competition, in the classroom, in fundraising, and in reconnecting with alumni. He was recently awarded a 5-year contract extension that runs through the end of the 2023-2024 academic year. Born in Salem, Oregon, and raised in Columbus, Ohio, Sell came to South Dakota State from the University of Northern Iowa, where he worked in various roles at the university and within the Cedar Falls, Iowa community for 10 years. He also worked at Villanova University, Syracuse University, Ohio State University, and Bowling Green State University. Sell gained further experience working in the private sector for various sports teams and events. Sell earned his bachelor's degree in sports management from Bowling Green State University in Ohio in 1991 and completed a master's degree in physical education sports administration at the Ohio State University in 1992. Sell and his wife, Jeannie, are the parents of 4 children. Dave Herbster. Dave Herbster has served University of South Dakota since 2007 and was named its 13th athletic director in April of 2013. Since then, Coyote Athletics has exploded into the Division I era with new facilities, a focus on the student athletic experience, and countless championships. Herbster came to USD from the University of Nebraska-Omaha, where he has served as assistant to the chancellor and director of athletics from 2005 to 2007. And prior to Omaha, Herbster was director of athletics at Concordia University in St. Paul from 2001 to 2004. He has also worked in the marketing departments at Pittsburgh State and North Dakota State. Herbster graduated from Virginia Tech in 1991 with a degree in marketing. He He was a member of the Hokies men's basketball team and served as its captain during the 1990-1991 campaign. He earned his master's degree in education in sports management from Virginia Tech in 1994. Herbster currently serves on the FCS Athletic Directors Association Executive Committee and was just named the FCS Athletic Director of the Year. He and his wife Kelly have 3 daughters, Morgan, Casey, and Leah. Please join me in welcoming our panelists for today.
Thank you, President Jason. And as you said, I'm Tony Nohr, and honor and privilege to moderate today's conversation with 2 very distinguished guests here with us at what has been a busy time for them, busy time for our student athletes. We appreciate you taking time out of your schedules to be here. Just a reminder that all of our programs, including this one, are archived online through Facebook or YouTube, and you can view the playback of this program there. So I want to start, and we will jump into the unprecedented period in college athletics that this has been over the last 14 months. Before I do that, I want to acknowledge something that we will talk about towards the end of our time together. But I do want to say congratulations to Justin Sell, John Stugelmeyer, the student athletes at South Dakota State University. As you well know, the game on Saturday was a decisive victory in the favor of the Jackrabbits, and they will be playing this Sunday for the national championship game. So we'll get into that towards the end, but want to acknowledge that. Let's start with David. Set the table for us. Just thinking back, we've covered a lot of ground as a society, as human beings, the last 14 months. But it's Tuesday, March 10th. You, the Lady Coyotes, were celebrating a Summit League victory at the Denny Sanford Premier Center. That was a Tuesday. The next Wednesday, or the next day, we all know that things changed and changed quickly. Step us back through that period for you, period for your coaching staffs, and what that was like having to tell your student athletes that their season was over.
You know, thanks, Tony, and thanks everybody for putting up with me and Justin today. We'll try to get along today. If I look back to that time, you know, right before that, the Summit League basketball tournament played, you know, soon after, or right before that, we heard a little bit about COVID, or this coronavirus, and it seemed to be overseas. It wasn't sure if it was going to affect us, and even some of the discussions we had leading into the Summit League tournament, what were some precautions or some measures that we could take? And we probably had extra hand sanitizers and things like that around, but we really didn't know. And so it's winning that afternoon, celebrating that night, and then slowly that next day, you started to see major league sports start to cancel. You started to see conference tournaments start to cancel, and it really started to get a little more worrisome at this point. If the NBA is going to start canceling games, I think they might have been the first one that went, and then pretty soon you've got the NHL. You have several conference basketball tournaments that start to just cancel, and some, in one case, during the middle of a game at halftime of a tournament itself, they said, okay, we're done. You're trying to process everything at this point, and as much as anything, what type of information do we need to even begin to process at this point? But by Friday, or was it Thursday now, again, like everybody else, I think everything kind of runs together a little bit, but all of a sudden the NCAA came out and said, we're canceling championships. And soon after that, the series of dominoes hit so fast. It was incredibly tough for our ladies, winning the regular season and winning the conference tournament, to all of a sudden have that snatched from them. We had about 4 or 5 track athletes practicing in New Mexico for the indoor nationals. We had to pull them out of there. We had golf teams on the road. We had to pull them back. We had softball on the road. We had to start pulling everybody back. And right now, it's tough to have that conversation with the coach, because all I can tell you at this point is, I need you home. Everything's canceled. Spring championships are done. And I don't have a lot of answers for you. And, you know, it was soon after that now you've got classes were going remote, and campuses are kind of scuttled. And
it's probably the first time in my life I've been called essential personnel. But I got to come in, I got to actually come to campus every single day, right? But those are incredibly tough conversations. And I had a daughter, my middle daughter plays soccer up in the Twin Cities at Concordia St. Paul. She's pulled back too. So I saw it from dealing with our coaches and our student athletes, how difficult those conversations were, but also from a personal level, having my own daughter go through it, and you just don't have good answers at a time when we didn't have a lot of information about what we were doing. It was just the complete and total, the precautions and the kind of the, for lack of a better word, lockdowns that were occurring. But I think through this process, I think the one thing it's taught us, and it's to be able to have these conversations with our student athletes, and certainly with the coaches, is about being resilient, about perseverance, and you don't have a lot of information. We all end up at a point in time where we have to trust those individuals above us are making the best decisions for us. And even today, I think, for me, I think what overall, if I look back at what has this really taught us, is that for all the obstacles that ended up being put in our way, we found a way around them. And it doesn't seem like it was only 14 months ago. It seems like it was 14 years ago, but it's gone by in a flash, too.
Thank you. And let's pivot. We have learned. We didn't know much 14 months ago. We've learned a lot since. We've covered a lot of ground in navigating this. Justin, you chair currently the Student Athlete Experience Committee on a national level. Help us understand the experience for your student athletes the last 14 months. What has SDSU done? What has the NCAA done to come alongside you and the student athletes to help navigate this period?
Yeah, well, first, great to be here. Great to see people. I think Dave and I were talking. We haven't had the opportunity to be in groups, so kind of a first chance to get back out and see folks here in our state and certainly down here in Sioux Falls. I think looking at things in total, you have to step back a few years ago, really, from an NCAA perspective, the student-athlete experience, and I think it's really what defines SDSU and USD. On academics are always first. We certainly want to provide skills, degrees in anything our student athletes want to be in, and help them continue to develop, and then certainly a championship experience. But if you look over the last 3 or 4 years, and this is part of what drives me nuts when we talk about name, image, and likeness or transfers, there's been some tremendous work done at the NCAA level to support students. And it's from health and safety, a ton of health and safety things, concussion management, nutrition, and then certainly mental health. Those are investments that not only has the NCAA kind of led the charge in what we should be doing as schools, but each of us have had to find ways to support that, to hire staff, to fund those areas. And so as you walked into this pandemic time, we were already trying to address all those different needs. And then, as David remarked, when you're going virtual with classes and students are kind of all over the place, most of us in our department, we didn't have staff back till August 1st. And so you're trying to get your arms wrapped around what are the things we need to do. First, to keep our students safe. So testing, tracing, all of those things became part of our vocabulary. We all probably got honorary degrees in pandemic management and epidemiology, things that I never thought I'd have to do in my career. But, as you start to put it together, you're just at the base level, you're trying to think of others and you're trying to support each other. And then you're taking all those things that we've been working on the last 2 or 3 or 4 years, and you're really trying to ramp that up. The biggest difficulty was not having the day-to-day interactions with students to really know. So you're relying on your coaches, you're relying on your athletic trainers, your strength and conditioning folks to give you a good sense of where are our students. And I think going through all the doubt, putting the things together very organized, knowing that they're part of institutions that really care about them, helped us really steady that ship. I think we got really practiced in the fall on handling those things, and I think it led to an opportunity to play sports this spring and to provide that opportunity. And so in total, there were challenges through the fall, but I think our student athletes have done a tremendous job, and I think having that connection to a team, having that connection to goals, reasons why you still need to go to class, I think that's helped level for our student athletes and provided a base for them to handle all of the challenges that are out there.
Thank you. Let's go back to David. We talked about some of the challenges in ensuring safety, navigating, testing, all those things. Let's talk about the financial impact what this means for the university and more specifically here, the athletic department. We went through a period leading up to the football season last year where different conferences were making different decisions. Missouri Valley ultimately deferred until the spring. But even when, whether it was basketball or other sports, minimal number of fans, fewer tickets, less food and beverage. Talk about what this means for you as we sit here today, and then looking out over the next year or two.
Sure. Good question, because I look at last year, and when everything kind of stopped, the NCAA basketball tournament itself didn't happen. There's a large portion of revenue, I'd say the majority of the revenue from that NCAA tournament is returned back to the schools and the universities. And so we saw a reduction in our, almost an elimination, but a severe reduction in our NCAA tournament revenue from last year, and we'll experience that again this year until it makes itself up. The revenue side, I think we all took a pretty big hit on, especially if you talk about tickets, corporate sponsorships, NCAA revenue, rental income, corporate sponsorships. There was just a whole host of things that really got pulled back. So that being said, now you got to look at the expense side of things too, right? And so our travel was different. We didn't have almost a third of our season last year because the spring season was cut short. So you have a lot of those expenses that don't occur. And again, this year, most of these seasons, it's not been technically what we would consider a full season. With a lot of the schedules, you are kind of shrinking those down. In football, it was only going to be 8 games. Basketball, for the most part, it was conference only. I mean, we really shrunk things down. We haven't been on the recruiting trail either. That's a big part of our budget as well as recruiting, and we haven't been on the road recruiting since middle of March last year, and we can't go on the road recruiting until June 1. I mean, actually go out or bring student or prospective student athletes to campus. So it really has turned us upside down. There's been, I think, an amazing amount of work both on college campuses, and I know Justin's had to do the same thing as when you look to restructure your own budget. Granted, there's some expenses that we're not going to have. We also know there's revenue that we're not going to have, but we've had a tremendous amount of support from alumni, from donors, from fans who've been very understanding. You know, this year we were only able to play 1 home game out of 4, and we made the decision to prorate that money and give that ticket money back to our season ticket holders. The renovations that we had done in the Dome, we had, for the first time ever, we're able to actually sell suites and loges there. Well, we prorated that money back to them as well. The generosity of our fans have been, keep it. Or it's designated to whether it goes into our scholarship fund or just back to the Dome renovation fund. They've been really, really understanding. So it's key at times like this, because everybody, if you're running a business, you own a business, you're part of a business, you felt, in most cases, a little bit of pinch. A lot of people, and then there's some individuals that actually have prospered during this time as well. So the financial impact is real, and we're still looking at a deficit this year. My hope is that between the loss of ticket revenue and some guarantee money that we lost, that we'll able to at least claim a portion of that from the CARES Act money and be able to recoup a little bit of that. For us next year, I still see a downturn for us a little bit next year. I don't think we're totally going to jump out completely and totally next year. And we've already made budget cuts for next year, anticipating that and putting the total emphasis on trying to make sure that the student-athlete experience does not waver at all. Our philosophy, my philosophy during this process in dealing with the budget was I didn't want to compromise personnel, both coaches and staff or student-athletes. So during this process, we did not cut or furlough any staff, and we did not eliminate any sports. You've seen some colleges out there that during this time ended up eliminating sports. So we were fortunate to be able to work the rest of our finances around being able to preserve our people.
Yeah. Actually, you talked about the investment, just the investment that Dakota Dome was underway. You were getting excited to be able to welcome fans in the fall, and of course that changed. Maybe talk about what that looked like this spring then, trying to navigate football, basketball, all those sports concurrently.
It definitely a challenge, a scheduling challenge, to say the least. I couldn't be any more ecstatic the fact that we had the Sanford Coyote Sports Center, our arena, because for those of you that know, I mean, we used to play basketball in the dome, so I can't imagine trying to play basketball and football in the same space during the same, the same span of time. And Justin could probably attest to this as well. There was a point in time there where we had literally every single sport we had was competing. And so the challenge is not only, finding practice time for everybody, and in most cases they're in kind of what's technically their championship portion of their season, and you want to give those sports the priority, but everybody had the priority at that time. So we were definitely juggling. I give our staff, our facility staff, an incredible amount of credit because the amount of hours and time that they put in to try to get everything underway. I think we couldn't have done it without our people, and we couldn't have done it without our staff. And I'm sure coaches weren't always happy, and student athletes were discomforted at some point in time, but for the most part, they all had the opportunity to practice, train, and compete. And that's what our goal was.
Yeah, excellent. Speaking of competing, let's talk, Justin, you recently chaired Division I Transfer Working Group. You talk about providing opportunities for students to compete. Help our Rotarians just understand historically what the rules have been when a student athlete arrives on your campus and how that has changed here recently, and what that means for you at SDSU and then on a national level when we refer to the transfer portal, which has been getting a lot of headlines here recently.
Yeah, I'll try to break this down. That's an hour topic in of itself. If you go back several years, there's 5 sports that have not had the opportunity to transfer and play immediately, and that was football, men's and women's basketball, baseball, and hockey. And so over the years, it's been much more difficult to justify why those student athletes in those sports don't have the same opportunities that every other student athlete has. For a lot of years, it was really tied to academic performance. When you transfer, it is much more difficult to get a degree. And in those sports specifically, when you look at numbers, the numbers weren't really good. But over the last probably 4 or 5 years, those numbers have started to change. I think terms like APR, which were held accountable for graduation rates and academic success, have certainly brought all those other sports up with the other sports that had the current rules. So what's really going into effect now, it just happened here in the last couple of weeks, and we've been working on it for 3 or 4 years, is just that the fact all student athletes will have that chance to transfer and play once. And do that freely one time. The second time, you would need to be able to sit out a year. Within that, is there former high school coaches or somebody gets in their ear on the side as a third party and says, hey, if you're interested in transferring to this place, I think they might have a spot for you. We're trying to get out of that. The interesting part for me going through it all is it's really hard to legislate morality. And so behavior of coaches, those that choose to skirt the rules or to do those illegal things, it's really difficult to catch them. So we tried to set up a system that at least puts some markers in. You have to go through that process, put yourself out there. Now think about this in theory though. If it works right, students are going to end up getting contacted by a lot of other schools they would have never got through their normal channels. And so you can see over the next couple of years, I think you'll see that end up being a very positive thing. But the action's done by the student athlete, it's not done by the portal. And so making sure people kind of understand that. And then ultimately, we're going to have to do great work, and what you sell your university and the experience better be accurate. If you tell a kid they're going to play 30 minutes a game and you play them 8, you might lose that kid. And so I think it'll be really fascinating for us at SDSU. I think the same with David and his coaches. We work so hard on culture and recruiting the right students. Both for the degree and tying in the school, and that's why a large portion of our students choose SDSU. And then what we do within the locker rooms, I think that will help. The grass isn't always greener, but if you give students a chance today to feel that way, I think you're going to see some movement. And then the last thing I would say, as with everything, even name, image, and likeness, when you make change, the first year or 2 probably will be a little chaotic. The numbers will probably be very large, but there's always a correction, and it will go back to some sort of balance. I think you're finding right now there's so many students in the transfer portal for football, men's basketball, that are not finding a home. And I think they're going to start to figure out that that's not maybe the best option as you move forward. So it'll be interesting to track over the next year or 2.
Yeah. and fans are watching this closely and just preparing for this. USA Today had done an article even before this change went into place. 40% of the players in men's basketball who enter Division I, by the end of their sophomore year, they have decided to depart that school. So that's prior to this. I think a lot of fans are looking at it, wondering what does that do? And I'm interested in your thoughts. What does that do to recruiting strategies? How does that change potential for students viewing maybe mid-majors or FCS programs as kind of an entry point into more? We'd be curious to get your take on what you've heard to this point and how you foresee that playing out.
Yeah, I think first, it's hard to transfer. Secondly, if you looked at all of the transfers in recent years, probably 85 or 90% are good ones. Like the student wanted to go, the coach is willing to help them. For us at SDSU, the example I'd use is it's the 11th or 12th or 13th guy on our men's basketball team wants to play. They want to have that experience, and so they transfer to Northern or to Augie and get a great education and be able to play, and it's a great thing. And we don't focus on that very often. All we focus on is the Power 5 handful of guys that are going to make those moves. I think it's also curious, I'd love to know how many people can actually name people other than Matt Mooney, who was very successful. Most of them, there aren't these huge impacts. And so you're taking this risk with culture in your program. You have to make a decision. Are we going to do this off of students that want to be here 4 or 5 years? Or are we going to make all these changes on any given year? And then how do you manage that? I think that will be the interesting part that coaches on a national level are going to have to balance. But again, I think where coaches struggle is when it feels like someone's putting a seed and planting a seed in someone's head, you should transfer. If somebody chooses that on their own, nobody in our business has a problem with it. Mm-hmm. It's when there's tampering that's involved that it becomes an issue, and that will be kind of that undertow will be interesting to watch from a national perspective. And then lastly, obviously, the Power 5 schools, I know they're putting up our all-league lists up in their recruiting rooms. And going to try to certainly get into FCS or mid-major type schools that have developed some great talent and try to recruit them away. I don't think there's any doubt that that's probably going to happen. But I think if you got something good, we'll hold on to a majority of our students, and those that leave, they leave. And you figure it out and move on.
Yeah, excellent. Let's stay on that point with David. Let's talk about roster scholarship management. There's changes with the ability to be immediately eligible. There's also the fact that all student athletes now have an extra year of eligibility due to COVID that was granted by the NCAA. Talk to us about either the advantages, opportunities, or challenges that come with students deciding to stay for an additional year.
I think the opportunities, especially as you're looking at your seniors who might have had a year taken away from them, to be able to have that opportunity to have that full year of competition. I think it was the right call by the NCAA. The challenge, as athletic directors and schools are finding, is that they gave us the opportunity for these seniors to come back for another year and that not count against our roster limits or our scholarship limits. But there's no resources or finances to fund those scholarships except then, frankly, on the backs of the athletic departments or the universities, whatever the case may be, to help fund those scholarships. You know, it's interesting, if you've got a basketball team, we have three of our ladies coming back next year. Now, 3 seniors. Now, it just so happened that at the particular time, our own recruiting process was not complete. And again, we haven't been able to go on campuses or in some cases even evaluate high school talent. Some of these high school kids didn't have seasons either to be even evaluated on. We're fortunate in the fact that in men's, women's basketball, typically you're gonna have about 15 on a roster. With women, there's 15 scholarships. Men, it's 13 scholarships, and that's what you can have. Well, fortunately, I think we'll have 16 total players next year on scholarships, so we're only over 1 on that point, right? Men's basketball, for us, it might have been an issue, it could have been an issue. One of our seniors, Stanley Amude, decided not to come back, and he's ended up transferred to the University of Arkansas to play 1 year there. So on that side, we don't have that type of exposure. With some of these seniors, whether they were playing or not will also determine whether or not they want to come back for an extra year. So I would tell you right now, from our perspective, I'm fully supportive of it. I've got to figure out a way to fund it and pay for it, because I believe that's the right thing to do by those student athletes. So that's the immediate one. The one that is be interesting down the road, because that means even the freshmen could technically have another year. The sophomores could have another year. They may want it, they may not want it. There's going to, as a coach, you're going to have your student athletes that are in this scenario probably fall into one of three categories. There's going to be those that you want to come back. You really want to have them come back. There's going to be those, and there's going to have student athletes that are going to graduate, and they could, you know what, if you come back, you're going to be a great asset to the team. Your role might not change much. And you're going to have some of those that want to come back that you think it's probably best that they move on. And so I think it's the hardest conversations are going to be by the coaches and trying to be realistic with these student athletes on why do you want to come back? Are you going to contribute? What do you contribute? And then in some cases, if as you're a senior and you've graduated, well, what's that next step for you? Is it graduate school? You know, for some student athletes, depending on how long they played, it might take them an extra year to graduate anyway, so you're still an undergraduate, even though you might get a 5th year. So it's, you know what, ultimately I think it was the right call. Down the line, if I'm a freshman or sophomore right now, that fits into the coach's recruiting plan that they've still got 2 or 3 years to manage and figure out. So I think it'll be a strong financial kind of hit for a lot of programs for 1 or 2 years, and then I think it evens itself out.
Yeah. Sounds like there may be an opportunity in graduate programs, folks sticking around and potentially looking for additional credits to take if they so choose.
Our presidents and our provosts like that.
Yeah, that's one of the pros. Let's go. This next subject is something we could have a program on, likely on its own. You've brought it up a couple times, Justin, in previous answers. NIL, name, image, and likeness. And just to set the table here, and I'll have you share some more, but if you go back to September of 2019, California State Legislature passed a law essentially saying that beginning in 2023, colleges in that state couldn't punish the student athletes for accepting revenue from their name, image, and likeness. So signing autographs, marketing opportunities on Instagram, maybe a whole host of endorsement opportunities that were going to be open when historically it's been tuition, room, and board, and maybe books and a few things there. That prompted the NCAA to say, we need to come up with our own. We want to drive the narrative here. And Mark Emert and team said those rules, we want those in place by January 2021. Well, that date got pushed. He made a call over the weekend saying, hey, we need to get this figured out and have our members vote on this prior to July 1. The reason July 1 is important on a national level is you have 5 states that have laws that go into effect this July with varying levels of what California passed. Essentially saying this whole amateurism versus professional conversation is changed. That's 5 states for July of this year. A quarter of the states have already said or passed legislation or have legislation in the works that will also do this. Well, there's been calls for something to happen at the national level that hasn't happened yet at Congress. So as we sit here today, I want to get your take on how this plays out, what that means for our South Dakota student athletes, and what this looks like as you play this out over the next 5 to 10 years. Justin, I'll start with you.
I'm looking away. I'm looking away.
Lose the flip.
That's what you get in the center seat.
There's so much to unwind there. I think at the end of the day, as you've had these individual state legislatures, and I think it's interesting you say the NCAA is trying to kind of take over and lead on this. We should have done this 3 years ago. Anytime you kind of get out of it a little bit and you let Congress come in and start doing this, that's why we find ourselves in this spot. And primarily because with the Power 5 schools and certainly coaching salaries, the buyouts that coaches have, and their ability to move freely whenever they want to, we got ourselves into a public perception issue and it's been blanketed to all schools. And it's really a handful of top-notch football and men's basketball programs that are really driving this. Certainly all the legal and lawsuit things that we've had in the NCAA over the last several years has pushed this to kind of to the brink. And so what we've been trying to do, and I'm on a legislative solutions working group, and it's really interesting when you sit with the AD of Ohio State or you sit with the commissioner of the Big 12. Their viewpoints on these things and the direction this is going has been fascinating to watch. Ultimately, we need one rule, we need one law, and the NCAA needs some protection out of that federal piece so we can all play on the same field, and especially when it comes to recruiting. And I think that's the big challenge, is how this all plays in, and then how you manage that. I think for a long time, student athletes have always had the ability to put in a request to start a business or to write a book. And the NCAA, I think a year ago, had 200 requests, 198 were granted. So those that wanted to kind of do a business activity have had the opportunity to do that. What we're now talking about is that whole brand development, and honestly, it'll be all the social media, the TikTok, the YouTube, the Twitter stuff, and they're going to look for the easy dollars, and it'll be your Justin Fields and Johnny Manziel's of years past, Zion Williamson's. I think you're going to see that. But I think in terms of the overall deal, we have the Alston case, which is running right now, which is looking at amateurism. We kind of need to see what that comes back and says so we can understand what the framework needs to be at a national level, and we are being pushed against the July 1st deadline with those 5 states. There are 35 states that have put in a bill. Many of them call it a Bill of Rights for student athletes. South Dakota is not one of those, but I think that's what's got to come together, and it's got to come together fairly quick. The impact in total, I think for most of us, a lot of the activities are things that we would probably feel pretty comfortable with student athletes being able to utilize. For all of us in this state, I think you're going to find, if you're going to start a summer camp or if you're going to do some of these activities that start a business, it's actually really hard work, and you have to pay taxes, and you have to go through this whole process of understanding how to run a business. So our job is going to be to educate our student athletes. What does it mean, and what are opportunities? So we'll work with our entrepreneurial studies group on campus and try to figure out how we might benefit regular students along with student athletes in approaching this from an educational perspective, not just what everyone says is pay for play. We're not paying them. But they're going to have some different opportunities to generate some revenue off their names. Obviously, for us, people like Mike Dahm and Macy Miller and Zach Zenner and certainly Mark Gronowski now probably have an opportunity to open some doors. For probably David and I, the biggest challenge is just managing those corporate relationships and our boosters and making sure there isn't illegal activity in that and with the recruiting. And secondly, that our corporate sponsor dollars need to stay full. If students start taking those or getting opportunities that are taken away from that other pool, those are fully being invested into their experience. And so what's the impact if we start to lose some money in some of those areas? That's what we've got to kind of balance. It's going to be a really interesting next year, without a doubt. And again, like I said, I think there's going to be this market adjustment. It'll be wild for a while. And then I think it'll come back into probably much more standard business, if you will.
Yeah. David, on this topic, have you heard from your coaches? South Dakota has not introduced and or passed legislation in this area. Maybe some of the neighboring states have. When it comes to recruiting, if you're a high school senior, are student athletes making decisions based on this yet?
I don't know if they're making decisions based on this yet. It might be at the Power 5 level. But at our level, as coaches, they're still trying to wait and see what it looks like. What does it look like? When does it start? And then being able to move from there. I think, like Justin said, the key is I fully anticipate it happening. What the final package looks like, I think you're still going to have the meat that's going to be the same, and it's going to go through. Our job and our role is going to be, how do we educate our student athletes? How do we protect them? And how do we protect our own programs, our own revenue streams, our corporate sponsors? And so I think there's going to be an incredible amount of education that has to happen, but it hasn't been a deciding factor on whether or not a student athlete comes to USD. I don't know if it has been for you, Justin, at SDSU. So right now I don't see it, but real quickly the definition of this is going to have to come to the surface so we actually know what it is that we're playing with.
Yeah, and it's coming coming quickly at various levels, and maybe talk about, you mentioned the Supreme Court case, which we should have a ruling on here, it sounds like in the next 30, 60 days. Can you unpack that? And then from your work on the national level, Justin, with the various working groups that you're a part of, do you see Congress viewing this as a priority and taking any action in time to avoid 50 different sets of rules in 50 different states?
Yeah, the Alston case really deals with the amount you're able to pay, in terms of full cost of attendance and what's that over a scholarship and books and room. And that really sets some parameters about what is that kind of leeway or how you stretch it. So that's why getting that kind of tied first before you kind of open up this whole world. Your second question was?
At the national level, to the extent that any of us can predict what's going to happen in Washington, D.C., do you see, I believe there's been some legislation introduced in the House around a framework, and I don't know if that's in partnership with the NCAA or just on their own.
Yeah.
So we don't have 50 different
Well, first
sets
off,
of rules.
priority-wise for Congress, and I can't believe this with the pandemic and dealing with presidential change from last fall and social justice issues and the economy and everything else. We're going to squeeze this in. I mean, it'll probably be one of the top things on their list. There are several senators that have gotten together to put some bills together. I do think they're trying to figure out a bipartisan way, if you will, to, they've all rallied behind this. The big bad college and universities are taking full advantage of these kids, and we are going to stop it. The issue that I have is they're not educated fully on some of the negative consequences that could come out of this, and I think that's what David touched on. You bring out a whole different set of characters in this that are going to try to take advantage of students. You've got gambling-related concerns when you get some other involvement. So how Congress can pull it together in one way that allows us to address these and open that up, but allows us to put a few boxes around trying to manage it, that's going to be tricky, but I think they're motivated to get it done because they're staring that July 1 date. Now, can the NCAA work with Congress in that? It's been interesting because the Power 5 lobbies on their own, and then you have all the conference commissioners across the country working this thing. Then you have all the legislators, and then you got the NCAA offices, and we all sit around trying to figure out how can we even have an impact on it. We're the ones that deal with it. We're the ones that know it, and we're the ones that are going to have to deal with the ramifications, and we seem to be as far away from the table as anybody. So it'll be fascinating to see how it comes together and then how we adjust to move forward.
Yeah, I guess we'll stay tuned, and it sounds like a future program as we learn more and as this rolls out. We'll welcome you back at a future date so we can talk about what how this plays out, what that really means for student athletes and our ability to compete, like we talked about at a championship level.
The only thing we know is David and I aren't worth anything. Our name, image, and likeness is no good.
Let's turn now to something we talked about at the outset. We talked about Missouri Valley pushing the football season to the spring. I think USD was able to have 4 games. SDSU was able to have more and has had success. This last weekend, 33-3 over the Delaware Blue Hens. Talk to us about this run up to this point, and then what does this week look like heading into Sunday for you, Justin?
Yeah, I mean, I think the run's a culmination, and for Jackrabbit fans in this room, transitioning from Division II to Division I and really trying to figure out how we compete at a high level. If you look over the last, let's say, 10 years, the growth, the changes that Coach Stig has been willing to implement, how to look at those things, how to build a program. We opened a new stadium, the Dana J. Dykehouse Stadium, in 2016, and I think as far as really taking us to another place, number one, Brandon just thought, we believe we can play at that level, and then 2, recruiting, it's a huge deal. And if you look at the last 5 years, we've been in the playoffs 9 straight, we've been a top 8 seed for 5 straight, we've been in the semifinals 3 out of the last 4 years, And now finally we were able to walk through that door, and it takes time, it takes patience, it takes perseverance. You can't give up on those goals. There were some lonely and dark moments driving back from some losses in some big playoff games and those kinds of things. And yet still staying true to your core values. And I think that's what I appreciate the most about STIG. We are what we are. We have been for a long time. We still are student athletes. Our football, 100 guys have over a 3.1 combined GPA, and they're in pharmacy and engineering, nursing, ag, bio, all the majors that we have. And so just really proud of kind of that whole story and then sticking with it. And it takes some time. And do you have the patience to get there? And then this week, obviously, it's wild, it's crazy. Got so many different things going on. We did sell out our entire allotment of tickets in 24 hours earlier this morning. It's gone, so we know there's going to be a ton of jackrabbits down in Frisco, which is great. You're never quite sure in the middle of May with school and everything else going how many people will make it, but it's crazy and wild in all the great ways. And I'm just really proud of what we've been able to stick with and build, and hopefully we get more chances, but we're going to savor this one.
Yeah. So you're probably already aware, 1 o'clock on Sunday, it'll be on ABC, nationally televised. So excited that the state will be watching that. When do you head down, and what is that leading up to game time? What does that look like for the student athletes?
Yeah, so a team will travel on Friday. They got to get down there and then be tested on Saturday, and then practice Saturday, and then get up Sunday morning and get ready to play. I think they're in a pretty good rhythm. Usually when you're playing this in January, you got a 2 or 3 week break, and so this is just kind of, there's a very business feel. I think the student athletes really celebrated in the locker room, but you can almost sense as soon as they started walking out, they were back on to trying to finish this thing on Sunday, and it was a unique kind of glimpse. Dave and I have talked many times, we've been around this business long enough, you have to celebrate those great moments. You just do, because they can be fleeting, they can pass, you may never get them again. At the same time, when you still got that big goal sitting there, trying to balance that. And then we have alumni function on Saturday night from 6:30 to 8:30 down at the Tostitos Parkway, part of the Dallas Cowboys area, so it'll be fun to get some Jackrabbit folks out there, and then I'm sure there will be some pretty good tailgating. I think Texas is pretty wide open. The stadium will be restricted in attendance. I think everything else outside of it may not. So hopefully we'll have a chance to get everybody down there and celebrate.
Yeah, there'll be a lot of jackrabbits there, and we'll be watching. And it's been fun. We talk about the rivalry, absolute rivalry, but just even preparing for this and seeing the relationship that you and David had, I'm sure that's become stronger over the last 14 months as you bounced ideas off each other in navigating the pandemic. Let's look at, I think, David, you came to Vermilion in 2007, just in 2009. So your time has overlapped significantly during the last 10 to 15 years. Talk to us about what has been most rewarding for you in your time at your respective universities.
Other than getting to know Justin and working
Other
Justin.
than that.
No, Justin and I are really good friends, so it's good to have a partner both in the Valley and in the Summit League. Thinking about that, I always used to think, the championships come, playoff runs come, things like that, All-Americans, and seeing the student athletes succeed, seeing them as visiting with them as their high school senior and coming to campus, and then that next thing you know, they enroll on campus, and then they have that success, and then watching them at graduation is one of the most rewarding times. But I think we've both been in our institutions long enough to now, I think what's even more rewarding than that is getting invitations to their weddings, that they've been out long enough, that you're getting the notices that now they have children. And I think that's one of the most rewarding things for me, because you've had a big enough impact on their life that they think enough of you to invite you to their wedding. And some of our student athletes have seen me eat, so they know they're going to lose out on the food side of it, but they're probably hedging their bets on the gift side of it. But I guess to me, that's it, because that's why I got into this business, was to give students an opportunity to play a game and get a degree. And at this level, I think you can have a tremendous impact on their lives. You can actually get to know them a little bit. You get to travel with them. You can talk to them at practices and games, and that's what I appreciate the most. So to me, the most rewarding thing is seeing their success, after college, starting families, and continuing in their journey in life.
Excellent. Justin, how about you?
Yeah, very, very similar. It's about people at the end of the day, and South Dakota has been awesome. I mean, I can't think of being anywhere else. You know, we talk a lot about having kind of a Big 10, Big 12 mentality, and yet we got a ma and pa feel. And that's really unique in today's world, and we can capture that. I would go just a little different, though, and I'll wrap up why these are important. I think for me, there's 4 dates that really stick out. March 6th of 2012, our women's basketball team, which had won quite a few championships, won in overtime here in the old arena, and our men's basketball team finally walked through the door for the first time in overtime. It was the cardiac moments. That's why I have no more hair. I mean, I had years taken off my life. But it helped elevate our university. September 8, 2016, opening of the stadium with the Luke Bryan concert and 23,000 people celebrating a future, looking at what we could be, was amazing. October 26th of 2019, College Game Day, brought the focus not only to certainly us, but our community in the state of South Dakota, and people got to see that from a national perspective. And then I think this May 16th is another one of those moments that kind of puts all of that into context. And for us, those are times where you can see our entire university grow. And that is really rewarding. It's not just about a football team. It's not just about a singular experience. It's about that whole collective and how do you elevate. And that's why I love coming to Sioux Falls. There's those visions and thoughts here in this community. You can see it in my 12 years here. It's amazing the growth in this community. And many of you are partners of both of our universities. And that's what ends up making us great. It gives us a chance to exceed all expectations, to blow people away. And by darn it, they're going to know about South Dakota universities, and our athletic programs have a great chance to showcase that. So I think that's probably what I'm most proud of.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. We're right at 1, but we will take a question or two for Justin or David. Go ahead, Mike. I can repeat it just so we can get it.
What should the ruling be considering gender-based participation in male or female sports activities?
We had a softball.
Whew.
So
I gotta go.
we're bumping up right on that hour.
Yeah.
The question was around
Yep.
gender-based. Of course, we had the conversations out in Pierre during the legislative session. What does that look like at your?
You know, and you're
your
seeing
level.
this legislation come up in other states as well. And so I really have not seen a strong enough argument for or against either side. I think we're probably all traditionalists and think there's one way to do this, right? And I don't know if it rises to the level in the state of South Dakota to be an issue or to be a problem. But again, I think with some of us, we're probably not even really looking for this seeing this as an issue or a problem. So I look at this and I think, you know what, this is what we hire, or this is what we vote our elected officials in office to make these, have these types of debates and these types of discussions. I don't know about you, but I have not. This is the first time anybody has ever asked me my opinion or my question on it. So I think at some point in time it'd be good for, all the states to actually go back to the practitioners, the coaches, and the administrators of, I don't know whether you're at the high school level or the collegiate level, and really get their take on it. And then I think ultimately you really got to, the impact is on the students and the athletes themselves. And I'm not sure if their voices really resonated in this conversation either. So it's a good way of probably not answering the question.
And I would just add, I think, for us, we have so many major issues we're dealing with right now that just trying to stick our nose in it and be really good today and the things that we need to be good at. But the impact of the potential to host NCAA championships, what if we weren't able to do the football playoff run? And I can tell you, home field advantage matters. We've been on both sides of that. You got to be at home to get to Frisco. And if that became an issue, I think that's got to be part of this context, and certainly the NCAA's stance in regards to gender equity and diversity and inclusion and those kinds of things. We live in that world every day, and it's really important to our folks, to our student athletes, that we manage those topics in the right way. And so it'll be interesting to see kind of where that one goes. But I think that would be the one piece that affects us directly from a business perspective. Certainly affects Sioux Falls with all the bids.
Absolutely. Another easy one for these two? Well, thank you both again for joining us. Do you want to join me in thanking Justin and David for joining us today?
Thank you.
These two have had a lot going on. We said at the outset, appreciate you taking time to be with us today and share. And a lot of movement, a lot of things we're going to find out here the next few months too, with the Supreme Court case and a number of the changes that are proposed in different states. So with that, we'll ask Jason to come back up and wrap us up. Thank you.
One more round of applause for David Herbster and Justin Self. All right, that will conclude today's meeting. Please join us again next week. We'll join here again. Thank you.